Hello, my name is Cris Putnam. It's my pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, Tom was not able to make it, but it's been an honor to work with Tom, and and I've learned a lot from Chuck Missler myself. I learned the whole Bible from Chuck. Really, I started listening to the Calvary Chapel tapes from back when Chuck Smith was there. They had firefighters.org was an organization that had them on MP3s for free on the internet for years. And so I actually learned most of the Bible through Chuck by listening to those while I was cutting the grass or running or whatever I was doing. You can, with today's technology, you can use that to study when you're doing other things. And so that was really a blessing to me. I did end up getting a master's degree in theology from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary as a result of Chuck getting me fascinated with the Bible, and it's really had a lot to do with my Christian walk. I also had a long running interest in UFOs and astronomy and space ever since I was a kid. My dad was an engineer and he was a scientist, and he kind of instilled that into me. I think he took me to see the movie Chariots of the Gods. Do you remember that one with Eric Van Doniken, where everything is aliens? Like in 1973 when it first came out. I saw that when I was a little kid, and that, of course, made an impression on me. I didn't really know any better, but Eric Van Doniken is pretty much a heretic. He calls himself a Christian, but I don't think so. When I became seriously interested in Christianity, I didn't know how my interest in all this weird stuff was going to coincide with that, right? But I saw Chuck Missler on YouTube, I guess. It was Return of the Nephilim. And it was a two-part series, and it was really about UFOs and how it might connect to the Bible. And I said, wow, I didn't even know Christians were allowed to talk about that kind of stuff. And so, that's really what attracted me to Chuck at first. It's like, wow, you really can talk about it. And, and the Bible might actually have something to say about it. So that made a big impression on me. And, I saw that not all Christians are dismissive or, of the strange and unexplainable. And in fact, if you think about it, the admission to this club that we call Christianity, and a friend of mine, Guy Malone, I think I heard him say this first, but really, we believe that a Jewish carpenter died for our sins, was buried for 3 days, and then rose from the dead and was seen by over 500 people. So you have to believe in the strange and unexplained to be a Christian. And that's really the point I was getting at. So it's really not that inconsistent. God incarnated as a man and then allowed himself to be killed. That's a pretty weird belief in and of itself, but I happen to believe it's true. Now, I'm not going to tell you that everything that we're going to talk about in this lecture is true. In fact, I'm going to tell you why a lot of it's not true. And Chuck is going to talk later about what he calls hermeneutical precision and hermeneutical hygiene, like the way we read the Bible, what we believe is true, why we believe it's true. There are extra biblical books that we refer to sometimes, but we don't treat them the same as Scripture. We look as the Bible as our source of truth, but we can use that to infer some other things that we'll talk about, but we don't say that those are definitely the truth. I try to draw a line between this is a fact, this is a fact, this is in the Bible, but if that's true, it might imply this. But I always want to make that distinction, and I want you to be clear when I'm speculating and when I'm not, so I'll make an effort to do that. It all kind of came together in this book, Exo Vaticana, and the interest in UFOs and the aliens and Christianity. How does this all imply? And why do we call it Exo Vaticana? Well, the Vatican is supposedly the leader of Christianity, and I think the first book we wrote, Petrus Romanus, did a fairly good job of explaining why I don't really believe that. I think they lost the gospel along the way. The Council of Trent, they actually cursed the gospel, if you ask me. At the Council of Trent, they say, if you say the man is saved by grace through faith alone, let him be an anathema, okay? Let him be accursed if you believe that you're saved by grace through faith alone. That's what the Catholic Council of Trent said. They've never taken that back. Okay, in a sense, they cursed what I call the gospel. I'm not. I think they're saved Catholics, but I think they have a lot of deception going on, and many of them aren't because they don't even know what the gospel is. But one thing that I was particularly proud of is Tom Horn's show, his new TV show, Skywatch TV. My friend Derek Gilbert is the host of that. He recently interviewed Chuck, and we should have sound here.
Is in the United States this week to talk to Congress and the United Nations. He's made a number of statements, and spokesmen for the Vatican have made statements very recently. Father Jose Funes, chief of the Vatican Observatory, the VORG, about the possible existence of extraterrestrial life and their spiritual state.
No. They are actually preparing to receive an
Well, that's what I
alien
wanted
visitor.
to say. How do you take this?
Tom Horn
yes,
and Chris Putnam wrote a book.
I'm very much aware of it, yes.
I love the book. I don't like the title. I kid Tom. He doesn't have a gift for titles. Exo Vaticana. I mean, what does that say? But the point is, it's one of the best documents I've ever seen on astrobiology. Mm-hmm. The work that he and Chris did in astrobiology is magnificent. I happen to know a lot about that area, mm-hmm. and it's the best treatment of the area I've ever seen. And I think it's a must book for any serious Christian to have. On the one hand, but they didn't just predict the abdication of the thing. They also uncovered this whole deliberate preparation to receive an alien visitor mm-hmm. of the Vatican, not secretly or as a little side thing. No, that's centerpiece. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fascinating.
And it's absolutely true. They have theologians who have written high-level theological documents about the arrival of an alien savior here to evangelize us and correct our theology. Maybe they have it right and we have it wrong, okay? Now, I don't believe that, of course, but I also don't want to be guilty of making an argument from silence, okay? An argument from silence would be, the Bible doesn't mention aliens, therefore aliens don't exist, okay? Well, the Bible doesn't mention toilet paper, but I think it exists, right? So that's an argument from silence. And in philosophy, you would be accused of making a fallacious argument if you said the Bible doesn't mention aliens, therefore there are no aliens. Okay? But what does the Bible say? And that's where I base my argument. The Bible tells me that the next big event that I need to be watching out for is the coming of Jesus Christ. Okay, and in judgment, all right? That's what it's warning me about. That tells me that's what my blessed hope is. It tells me that's what I'm supposed to expect. And it also warns me, be ye not deceived. Okay, and I think Chuck's going to emphasize that that's a command. It's not a suggestion. Don't be deceived, okay? So when I weigh these options, and I hear what the ET believer community is telling me, that the extraterrestrials, you know, they saw World War II and the atomic bombs, and they're concerned we're going to wipe out the planet, so they're coming here to save us. You know, that's what the world is telling us, and that's what the UFO people are telling us. But, you know, look in the Bible, you know, it doesn't say aliens don't exist, but it also says that there's going to be an unparalleled time of deception right before Jesus returns. And I think it fits that much better than the benevolent alien savior that's going to help me in my spiritual evolution. Okay, so it's not an argument about what the Bible doesn't say, it's what it does say. It does say, expect an unparalleled deception, that even the elect might be deceived, okay? And that's us. So I think it fits that category much better than the spiritual evolution category that we're hearing from the New Agers and the true believers in aliens. So what is this science that we're calling astrobiology, okay? Astronomy, the study of life in space, right? Biology, the study of life. Astrobiology is the study of life in space, but biology is the study of life. How do these two fit? Because we have no evidence that there's any life in space. So how can you get a PhD from a university in a science that has nothing to study? Okay? I don't understand that exactly, but to be fair, I want to be fair. I mean, we want to be intellectually honest. They do study things. One of the things they studied is, you know, one of the reasons they do it, if you remember the movie Contact, you remember Jodie Foster and her father was a scientist, and, you know, she gets these plans to go visit the aliens and all this, but their main argument was this, you know, her dad, the young Ellie, Dad, why do you think there's people on other planets? And her dad said, I don't know, Sparks, but I guess, you know, it's just an awful waste of space if they're not, all right? And well, think about it. The universe is huge. It's bigger than we can even imagine. We haven't really ever seen the end of it. We know that it's a lot bigger than we ever thought it was. And, you know, on a secular level, if you don't consider God as a creator, it does seem like a waste of space. But here's my argument. An awful waste of space? Okay, think about this. God is eternal, okay? We also believe he's omnipotent. He has all power. He spoke the universe into being from his mouth. He could do that as many times as he wants, I think. He could make 10,000 more universes, and it wouldn't be any sweat off his brow. So the concept of wasted space only applies to beings with limited resources, okay? There's no wasted space in God's mind, all right? And all that stuff might be there for a reason we have no clue about. And, maybe we're incapable of understanding it. But I don't think wasted space applies to God. But they do study things. And one of the things they study, and I think it's a legitimate thing to look at, is they're called extremophiles. Now, these are like bacterial type organisms that can survive in extreme environments. They usually find them in the ocean, like where lava kind of comes up in the ocean and creates a lot of bubbles. These things can live in boiling water. Okay, that's why they're called extremophiles. So they're living organisms that could live maybe in space or somewhere without oxygen. There might be things like that with a little bit of oxygen or in a really harsh environment. So they look at those examples, but those are all on Earth. Okay, they're not in space, but they think, well, if these can live here, maybe Mars could have one. And so that's what they study, but everything they're studying is stuff on Earth. It's not in space. They don't know of any life in space, period. So, but they do look at these examples as possibilities of what they might find, okay? It's a little different than an intelligent being, though, quite different between me and a bacteria, I hope. Now, the Vatican has been at the forefront of this search. In fact, in 2009, they invited the top astrobiologists in the world, secular, atheists, all these guys, to Rome. And they had an astrobiology conference. And there's a little clip just from the news that has sound too.
For the church, talking about life on other planets is not an everyday occurrence. But that was the theme at a week-long meeting that gathered scientists and theologians in the Vatican. The purpose of the meeting centered around astrobiology and the possibility that life exists elsewhere in the universe.
So it's not controversial at all to say the Vatican's looking for ET. They're having astrobiology conferences in Rome with the Pope. And we're talking about this guy that I'm going to talk about next is actually a Buddhist that they invited. But this, here's an article that was on the internet. And this guy's kind of an alien true believer, but all the UFO people see this very clearly, that the Vatican is laying the groundwork. They want to be at the forefront of the alien disclosure movement. They really do. And all the UFO people are very aware of it. Now, here's the Buddhist guy that they invited. And he spoke at that 2009 conference. Now, he's actually, I think, at the University of Arizona. And he's a cosmologist, astrobiology education outreach person, and his name is Dr. Cris. Seems to be a really nice guy, but he has like a really new age worldview. He's kind of into Buddhist meditation and all this sort of stuff. He even has a website where him and a bunch of monks do all kinds of Buddhist stuff, but he's one of the top astrobiologists in the world. Now, when he was at that conference, this is a quote right for him. He gave the keynote speech, and he said this: "It's plausibly estimated that there are hundreds of millions of habitable locations in the Milky Way," that's our galaxy, "which is just one of billions of galaxies in the universe. As scientists gather to discuss the progress in astrobiology, we still only know of one planet with life, our own, but there is a palatable expectation that the universe harbors life, and there is hope that the first discovery is only a few years away." That was 2009, so he's a little behind, but they're still looking. But why would he say that? Why would he say a few years away? And the main reason driving this is exoplanets. And this is where I got the name Exovacana. By the way, it wasn't Tom's fault. I think I came up with that. But it came from this exoplanet thing. It's Exovacana. So here's a diagram, showing a bunch of exoplanet and the sizes. What I want you to notice in that diagram is that most of them are huge. We're talking about gas giants. Look at them compared to Jupiter. Now, if you've ever studied any astronomy, you know that humans could not live on Jupiter because the gravity would crush us, all right? And now, those planets are a lot bigger than Jupiter, most of them, that they're finding. So they're probably not going to host intelligent life. So yeah, they're finding planets, but they're not habitable. Now, there are some that they call habitable, and I'm going to unpack that in just a second. Here's another diagram showing relative sizes of what they're finding. And you can see that most of them are, does that have the Earth on it? I have another one that has Earth. Okay, this is just currently the ones that they say are habitable. Okay, so while Dr. Impey's few years are pretty much now upon us, recent exoplanet discoveries, they seem to offer even more promise. I mean, they're finding ones that are more and more Earth-like, okay? But prior to 1995, they did not know about even one, okay? All we knew about was our own system. So it is kind of new. But you know, there was no evidence for any planets outside our solar system until 95. So all this is fairly recent. But that's changed dramatically. Now, when I prepared these slides, and I think this slide was probably a year ago, there was 1,706 exoplanets that they had identified. Okay, so it's probably up to around 2,000 now because they have the Kepler space satellite. That's what's finding most of them. It's out there, and we're going to talk about how it finds them. Most of these pictures that you're seeing, they're all just artist renditions of what they think it might look like. They don't have pictures of these planets. They don't know what they look like. They're just guessing. But it's a pretty good guess. I think they're probably about right. They probably look like this kind of. We know what Jupiter looks like. Most of them are kind of like that. They're gas giants, and they're not habitable. But the last slide I showed you, they think some of those are habitable. And the only reason why is that it's in an Earth comparable distance to its star. All right? And that's really what they call the habitable zone. And you know, this adjective habitable is really kind of a misnomer. They call it the Goldilocks zone, meaning it's not too hot, it's not too cold. All right? Just from the three bears, right? And the reason why that's important, because if it's too hot, liquid water will turn to steam and burn away. If it's too cold, it turns into a big glob of ice. And we know that you need liquid water for life. So when they say a habitable Earth-like planet, all they mean is that it's in a distance from its star that makes it possible for water to be there. That's all it means. And it doesn't mean water is even there. They don't even know if the water's there. It's just possible that it could be there. So now it's Earth-like. Do you see how that's a misnomer? It's not Earth-like, and we're going to go into some details why it's not Earth-like. But you know, water is crucial for the existence of life. So why this is a necessary condition, it's not, you know, doesn't prove that there's life there or it's habitable. You know, but it is necessary. But that's a small step towards really being habitable. And most of them are so big that the gravitational forces would kill us. So even though it might be in a habitable zone, if not, there's a whole host of conditions that need to be there that we can't prove are there. So nobody knows if it's really habitable. And you're going to hear it on the news increasingly that they're finding these habitable planets, but that's all it means. That's it. It's in a certain distance from its star. And it also matters how hot the star is, because our sun is not the epitome of all stars. There's stars that are much hotter. So that distance is also adjustable based on the star. So it's not so simple as they try to make it sound. And you know, if you need chemical reactions, water's necessary for life. Most of the life that we know about, I don't think there's anything that we know about that doesn't need liquid water. But that's all it means. And they don't know that any of them actually have water. How did they find them with the Kepler satellite? You know, this is where it gets interesting, because they don't even see these planets. Okay, there's no pictures of them. How is the Kepler satellite proven that it's there? Well, one of the ways is called, here's one they call habitable, Kepler 6e, but they found it what they call light transit curves, okay? Now, if you see the picture, you see the little line, then you see it dip, and you see a little dot. As the dot goes, the line dips. All that means is the Kepler satellite is watching that planet, and it's got light, it's reflecting light. But every so often, a little dot goes by, and the light gets dimmer. That's why you see the dip. Okay, that's the transit curve. That means something is orbiting it in a certain period, and as it goes by, it blocks some of the light, okay? And so therefore there's a planet there. That's how they find most of them, okay? And that's all. I mean, they just see that the light dims, so something must be blocking it. That's all they know, really. That's the main technique that they're using to find it. There's another technique, and it's called the wobble method. Now, you're probably familiar with the Doppler effect. You know, like a police siren goes by and it changes tone. Like you probably hear it in movies, like the one in Britain that goes, and then it kind of gets lower as it goes down, because that's the Doppler effect. And it affects anything that's a wave. Sound's a wave, light's a wave. So it works with light too. One of the ways that they argue that the universe is expanding is that they call it redshift. When things are moving away from you, the light shifts toward a red color in the spectrum. So when a planet orbits a star, it's really not orbiting just the star. It's orbiting a common center of mass, is how we disclaim it in physics. But the planet makes the star wobble, okay? And the star will make the planet wobble a little bit. Now, when the planet wobbles, it creates a Doppler effect, all right? And so we see a redshift in the star. That's the other way they detect them. They didn't see the planet. They saw the star wobble. So now there's a planet there. Okay, you see how speculative that is? It's not very solid. So this is the other way they find exoplanets. And then they might try to use the other technique to see the transit thing. And so they'll use them both to verify it. But this is the main way they're finding these thousands of exoplanets that they're telling us about. They don't have pictures of them. They don't have any telegrams or, phone calls. But here's another one. This is an artist's rendition of the neighbor of the one I just showed you, Kepler 61-2F in the foreground. And Kepler 62e, the one that they say is habitable, is that little star that you see on the side. And this one would need the greenhouse effect in a major way to produce life, because it's so far from the star. It has lots of carbon dioxide. It would be necessary to hold enough heat in there for the greenhouse effect for us to be able to live there. Other than that, it's probably a solid block of ice. So they don't even know if it's possible there could be life there, but maybe if there's a ton of CO2 and the greenhouse effect keeps it in there. So this is another one that they'll tell you is habitable, but probably a block of ice. Here's one, 51 Pegasus b. Same kind of thing. 51 Pegasus b was one of the first planets to be confirmed to be around a sun-like star, meaning it orbits a star that's a lot like our sun. Okay, it's the same size as our sun, but it's half the mass of Jupiter. So it orbits around its sun at roughly the right distance of Mercury. Now think about how hot Mercury is close to the sun. So even though the sun it orbits a star like our sun, if you live there, you would probably be cooked instantly. So what? There's not going to be any life there that I can think of, unless it's something like an extremophile or something like that. But highly doubtful that anything like this is going to harbor any kind of intelligent life. That's for sure. Kepler 186F, another one. It's just like the same story, and you see the orbit, you see the system. And there's the habitable zone and that little thing there. There's the Earth. This is the one that's closest to the Earth in size, but it's really not in a good distance. So probably not going to habit intelligent life. And they've never really seen it anyway. They're just assuming it based on the methods that I showed you. That's really the two techniques that Kepler uses to find these things. So astrobiology is a science, but it's based on tons of assumptions. And that's what I want to unpack for you now, because this is really where you can be deceived. And this is what Chuck's going to talk about next. Astrobiology, we live in a society now where we have elevated scientists mainly to be the ultimate arbitrators of truth, okay? It's an idea that's called scientism. And it means that the only way to truth is through science. That's really what it means. But scientism is incoherent, meaning it's not true. It can't be true because it doesn't even meet its own standard. It commits suicide. And here's why. Does the idea that the only way to truth come from science, was that developed from the scientific method? No, it wasn't. They just developed that out of thin air. So it doesn't meet its own standard of truth. It can't be true. It says the only way to truth is through science. They didn't come to the idea that through science, they just said that. So it's a self-refuting idea. It commits suicide. It doesn't meet its own standard of truth. It's telling you the only way to truth is through science, but they didn't use science to determine that, did they? So the end of story. The next assumption, the Copernican revolution. okay? Now, everybody remembers that Copernicus got in a big fight with the Pope over the Earth being the center of the solar system that we live in, right? That everything revolves around the Earth. And the Pope censored Copernicus and put him on house arrest. And yeah, it turns out he was right. And I believe that we do revolve around the sun, and I don't have a problem with that. But over time, that developed within the scientific community to what they call the Copernican principle. Now, this is different. They went quite a bit further. This is the idea that not only we're not in the center, we're not in any special place at all. And there's nothing special about the Earth. It's just one of many that probably have life too, and we just happen to be here. There's not located in a special place in the universe, and they've extrapolated it even further to what they now call the principle of mediocrity. Something messed up there, but principle of mediocrity is that we're just mediocre. I mean, there's nothing special about the Earth. There's nothing special about humans. We're just evolved primates. We're going to talk about that next, but it's just that we're in a mediocre location in the universe. There's nothing special about the Earth. It's just, that's it. And this is an accepted principle in astronomy now. It went from Copernican revolution to the Copernican principle, now principle of mediocrity, and that's pretty much the party line now. But they've extrapolated from that because now, we have this belief in abiogenesis, that life spontaneously came into being when lightning struck a mud puddle or whatever. Nobody knows. They don't really have any coherent answers. They have some theories. They call it RNA world, and it came a DNA molecule self-replicated, and they have all lots of just so stories about how life came into being, but none of them are proven, and nobody really knows. And even the top atheist is going to tell you that in a minute. So you have abiogenesis and then Darwinism. Everything evolved from a common ancestor. So there's nothing special about the Earth, and we're in the right place to have some liquid water. So abiogenesis happened, and we evolved, and there's no reason to believe that hasn't happened over and over again, right? I mean, that's really their argument. Humans are not special either. So, we're not childs of God. We're not embodied souls, that God holds in his heart, and he cares about what we do and how we behave and how we treat others. None of this is important anymore. We're just evolved primates on a mediocre planet in a non-significant location in the universe. And this is the scientific worldview. And this is what drives atheism, okay? And these are the reasons, but all these assumptions lie beyond astrobiology. So when you challenge these, you undermine it, okay? And I think all of them are open to challenge. I think scientism is incoherent right off the bat. There's lots of things that we've arrived at that weren't through the scientific method that we know are true, okay? My own thoughts. Are you aware of what you're thinking right now? Okay, did you arrive at that through the scientific method? Okay, so it's obviously not true. I mean, you're aware of your own thoughts, right? So you can prove that our consciousness actually overrides a lot of this, just human consciousness, and they don't understand that either. And I go into that in my book, The Supernatural Worldview, so that would be a whole different lecture. But these assumptions are just that, and astronomers tell Congress they're almost certain ET exists. And this was very recently. They asked for millions of dollars from the United States Congress. Country going broke, don't seem to even be able to feed everybody all the time, but we're going to build some huge satellites to look for ET. And that's what's going on in this world. And it's all based on assumptions. And, I'm all for science, and I enjoy scientific experience, but, I think we're stretching the boundaries when we're spending so much money looking for something that we have no idea that is even there. And it's a waste of money. I think that, it's an interesting question, but it's really more of an atheist religious belief than it is anything else, than a scientific quest. Because if you're an atheist and you accept all these things, abiogenesis, Darwinism, the Copernican principle, if you accept all those assumptions, this kind of proves your religion. When you find ET, oh, we were right, and it really is their apologetics. It's them trying to prove atheism and trying to prove that nothing special about humans, that Christianity is wrong. And this is really one of the ways they're doing it. Now, what makes this troublesome for them is that they've never found anything, first off. But there's some other secular scientists who see through some of these assumptions and realize that there is something special about the Earth. And their book is called The Rare Earth Hypothesis. All right? And what's really interesting about this book is that these guys are secular. They're not even Christians. But they go through a whole host of reasons of why the Earth is special, and there's nothing like it that we know of. And then none of these exoplanets have exhibited any of these characteristics that are necessary for intelligent life to exist. So these guys, it was written by Peter Ward, a geologist and a paleontologist, and Donald Brownlee, who's an astronomer and astrobiologist. Okay, he's interested in these questions. He just doesn't think it's true. They argue that the emergence of complex life requires a host of fortuitous circumstances, I mean, more than you can imagine, that are not accounted for by these astrobiological assumptions. They're just skipped over. Now, what are they talking about? Point one, the planet has to be in the right location in the right galaxy, all right? Our location in a spiral galaxy, the Milky Way, really matters, okay? It's really important to the development of intelligent life. There's a lot of places in the Milky Way that are called dead zones, all right? And they're so freezing cold and everything else, there's no way anything could live there. But we're in a perfect location in our galaxy, and it has to be that location in a spiral galaxy for the conditions that we observe, all right? So it's rare, and you don't find it very often, anywhere. And I don't think they found any other example of a planet exactly where we are in our spiral galaxy. The second point is that it has to be orbiting in this Goldilocks zone. We talked about that, right? So it could have liquid water. And so the third point, a life-supporting system must be structured more or less like our solar system with a small, rocky inner planets and outer gas giants like Jupiter. Without Jupiter, Earth would be bombarded by asteroids. Think about the moon. What does the moon look like? What is it covered with? Craters. What are those made from? Huge rocks smashing into the moon. If the moon wasn't there, where would they hit? Earth. We'd be dead probably, just from asteroids hitting us. So the moon is like a guard, all right? It catches all the junk before it hits the Earth. Jupiter is even bigger, and it's further out. So all the really big stuff hits Jupiter. And if it wasn't there, it'd be heading this way, and we'd probably be wiped out, all right? So you have to be in the right position with these other planets around you and a moon to protect you from getting hit by asteroids and wiped out. A big asteroid would wipe the Earth out in a heartbeat and kill everybody. So the moon is like our little safeguard, and Jupiter is the big safeguard. So that's necessary for intelligent life to exist. Even if you believe in evolution, see, evolution would be over millions of years. So what are the odds of an asteroid hitting us over 1 million years? Pretty high, right? So we'd never evolve. So it doesn't fit, even with their own assumptions. So the fourth, the need for stable orbits rules out systems with large planets close to their sun, like the one I just showed you. Again, our solar system reflects an optimal design for the development of intelligent life. So it's basically an argument for intelligent design, but it's coming from secular scientists, okay? And they just realize that this is true, and these other guys are living in a fantasy world, all right? And their book is called The Rare Earth Hypothesis, and it's a fairly deep book, but it's probably the definitive work on the subject as far as why the Earth is so rare. And so the Earth also has to be the right size. This is the fifth one. Like I said, Jupiter, the gravity would literally crush your bones. You'd die. You couldn't walk on Jupiter. You'd be smashed right into the ground just from the gravity. So the planet has to be a perfect size for intelligent life to exist. And it has to have a large moon, which was the point I already made when I was talking about Jupiter. I kind of combined this. 7, this is the one that most people don't think it's very significant, but it probably is the most, okay? It's plate tectonics. This is the idea, the Earth's crust moves, we have earthquakes, it shifts. When that happens, all kinds of minerals are released into our water that we need to live. Potassium, all those kind of things, all these your vitamins that you take, those are metals that come out of the core of the Earth, out of lava and stuff like that. Now, if we didn't have plate tectonics, we wouldn't have a source of those. And we wouldn't have intelligent life, okay? Humans would not exist if we didn't have plate tectonics on Earth. That's a fact. And they make a big point of that. And they actually say that it's probably the most essential of all of these that I'm telling you is plate tectonics because of that mineral factor. They say it's decisive. And we don't know of a single planet anywhere other than the Earth that has plate tectonics. Not a single one. All right? And that's a fact. 8, abiogenesis and evolution. And I think most of us are pretty familiar with lots of arguments against that. We've heard lots of creationists talk about it, and lots of people that had different beliefs about the age of the Earth, but they all still agree that life did not start by lightning hitting the mud puddle or, common ancestry and all that. It doesn't make sense. There's a lot of scientific evidence. There's a thing called the Cambrian explosion, is what it is. You ever heard of that? Even if you believe, some of you are probably young earthers, some of you are probably old earthers. I don't really want to get into that debate, but the atheist scientists, all the scientists agree, even the ones that say it's billions of years old, they look back at the Cambrian period, okay, a long time ago, and they see an explosion where every phenotype of life that we know of today popped onto the Earth. Literally, in geologic time, if you believe it's millions of years old, it was like really fast. Everything just popped into being, and they can't figure it out. They don't see a common ancestry happen. They see almost every phenotype that we are aware of today appearing at nearly the same time on a geologic scale, which could be a million years. I mean, but I'm just going by their assumptions, showing you that even their own evidence disproves a lot of their own assumptions with astrobiology, because we don't see common ancestry slowly developing. We see, boom, everything appearing real fast and then developing a little bit, and that's explainable just by things like breeding. We breed horses to be faster and bigger and different by, designing it ahead of time. Somebody thought of it and bred them. I think that's what we see in science, and I think God did it. I'm not a theistic evolutionist because theism and the way they define evolution are like contradictory. There's really not any room for natural selection to be coherent with a creator. I just don't see that. Now, there might be some room that God evolved something that already existed to be better than it was or something like that through, breeding, but there's not any evidence that we all evolved from some kind of bacteria, that kind of thing. There's just not, how do you compare a sponge to a human being and say they came from the same source? I mean, it just seems silly. So, all these things that they just assume, it's a lot more rare than they think. This abiogenesis idea, it's the origin of life from non-life, okay? We've never seen that happen, ever. There's no examples of it. It's really a mystery in science. And in an essay, this is by Richard Dawkins, okay? Probably the world's most famous atheist, the God delusion, right? He's telling you, you're delusional for believing in God. Well, let's see what he believes. He says, as far as we know, he's talking about abiogenesis, it may have happened only on one planet out of a billion planets in the universe. Of course, many people think it actually happened on lots of planets, but we only have evidence that it happened on one planet after a lapse of 500 million years to 1 billion years. So the sort of lucky event that we're looking at could be so wildly improbable, with the chances of its happening somewhere in the universe could be as low as 1 billion in any 1 year. Okay, and he thinks that we're nuts for believing God created us. Now, one of his mentors, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick, he was a co-winner of the Nobel Prize for discovering the helix structure of DNA. He also wrote a paper because he couldn't explain abiogenesis, so maybe aliens did it. All right, this is called directed panspermia. Francis Crick wrote this paper saying that an honest man armed with the knowledge available to us now could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears to be at this moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions we would have to have had to get it started, to get it going. So there he is, famous atheist, discoverer of the helix structure of DNA, saying that it would almost have to be a miracle. So how did it happen? Well, he says that maybe aliens seeded life on Earth. And that's what that paper's about. Now, many movies have come out supporting this idea. And here's life started on Earth as a result of an infection of microorganisms sent here deliberately by a technological society on another planet by means of a special long-range unmanned spaceship. And we're nuts for believing in God. Okay. Yeah, that's what he said. And he meant that. And that was a scientific hypothesis that he put forward, because that's how desperate they are to solve this mystery of life that they don't have any answer for. So there's been lots of movies that have supported this idea that life was seeded on Earth. Mission to Mars was an early one. 2000, Knowing, 2009, Prometheus, 2012. Expelled. How many of y'all saw Expelled? Really good movie. If you're not familiar with intelligent design theory, this is a lot of what I'm talking about, watch this movie. I'm about to show you Richard Dawkins trying to explain the origin of life to Ben Stein in that movie. And it's such a classic. I just love it.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
And I think that says it all. I mean, he could see that they don't have an answer, and he doesn't have anything to offer other than maybe aliens did it, and we don't have any evidence of aliens, yet we're delusional for believing in a creator God. You know, this is where, you know, the atheist logic leads, and, you know, it's incoherent. This is one of my mentors, Dr. Michael Heiser. He's a biblical scholar. He's the academic editor of Logos Bible Software. He also happens to follow the UFOs and the whole astrobiology thing. He has a blog called UFO Religions, in addition to one called The Naked Bible. So he's a Bible scholar. He's got a PhD in Hebrew Bible. And, but he talks about this stuff a lot. And this is a quote. He wrote a book, and Tom Horn published, but Heiser explains that belief in panspermia, the idea that life was seeded on Earth by aliens, he says this: it paves the way for a true merging of science and religion. It will be the paradigm that allows the atheist to tolerate religion and allows the literalist Bible readers, the Eastern Buddhist, and the pagan to simultaneously parse the new science the same way. This might, in turn, be useful fodder for a global religion. Okay? So if everybody starts believing we were created by aliens, then we kind of have a common ground, right? And then if these aliens come down and, well, you know, your religions are all just about right, but you got it wrong here, you got it, you know, well, let us correct it all for you, and we'll all live together in a new world order, and we'll all be happy. You know, he's speculating there, but it would be a way to connect the human race in an unprecedented way, because it would be outside of this world. And it would get the attention of everybody on the world, wouldn't it? And I have a quote of Ronald Reagan saying the same thing. This is coming from approved Catholic literature. Okay, this has the Pope's stamp in it. It has the imprimatur, meaning that it's approved by the Catholic Church. This was written in the 1970s. Kenneth J. Delano wrote a book, and he said this: "Our religious sensitivities ought not be shocked by the idea that the evolutionary history of the human body might be traced back ultimately to a primordial refuse heap left by visiting extraterrestrial intelligence when the Earth was young. You evolved from alien garbage." Okay, that's a priest. All right, and that's approved Catholic literature. Here we have the Vatican hosting another astrobiology conference. I told you about the one in 2009. They had one in 2014, this time in Tucson. Me and Tom Horn visited the Vatican Observatory in Arizona. It's on Mount Graham in a little town called Safford, Arizona. But the closest thing is the University of Tucson. I flew into Tucson to go there. And they have a great astronomy program. They have a Steward Observatory, and they developed a mirror technology, a way of making mirrors where they can make them bigger than ever before so they can gather more light. The more light you can gather, the further into space you can see. So that's why the most powerful telescope on the planet is on Mount Graham. It's not solely the Vatican's. The Vatican got the prototype. It's called the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. The Large Binocular Telescope is the most powerful telescope in the world. Its specific mission is to look for life-supporting planets. Okay, and that's what they're doing up there on Mount Graham. Let's see, here is the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. That's what it looks like. That's me and Tom Horn standing in front of it when we visited, and we did talk to a Jesuit who was on duty there. This is the sub-millimeter radio telescope. And it works in the lower bands of the infrared spectrum, and they use it to try to detect minerals and liquid water and things like that. So one of the ways they would try to find water on a planet would be see what sort of light reflections they could pick up in the lower bands that you can't even see with your eyes. So that's what radio telescopes, one of the ways they use those in the search for life. Here's the sub-mill, and then in the background, you see that really tall building? That's the Large Binocular Telescope. And so me and Tom walked up the trail there to the Large Binocular Telescope, and this is what it looks like at night when it's open. See those two huge mirrors? Those two huge mirrors together are bigger than any mirror ever made for astronomy. Now, they're working on a new one now that's supposed to be bigger. I think it's going to be in South America somewhere. That's it. And you know, with all this light gathering power, one thing you might not think about, but light has a finite speed, right? Well, Chuck says it might be slowing down or speeding up. We won't go into all that, but it basically stays constant. It might have changed some, but so we can calculate how long it takes light to get from a certain distance to a certain distance. So the further you can see into space, you're looking back in time. Think about that. You're looking back in time. The stars that we see today might not even exist. They might have burned out 1,000 years ago, but the light took so long to get here, we're still seeing them. Does that make sense? So you can look back in time with something like this. They're actually, what they're seeing might not even be there anymore. That's the weird part. So who knows what they're going to find, and if it's there anymore, right? But they actually, and it's $87 million for this thing. So it's not just the Vatican that built this. There's a whole consortium, one of them being the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And I think they might have named the Lucifer device, which we might be able to get to here. But their specific mission, this is on their website, the key scientific objective is to survey nearby stars for debris disks down to levels which may obscure the detection of Earth-like planets. So that's what they're looking for. Here's the Lucifer device. This is what sounds really fantastic. You know, what does it stand for? It's the Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Spectroscopic Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. It's an acronym for that. It sounds kind of forced. Somebody wanted it to be Lucifer, and they shoehorned it in there. And the best I can find is that the Max Planck Institute applied for money from the German government to get involved in this. There's a German politician. His last name literally means devil in German. And I forget what it is. I might have it. Yeah, that's right. What is it? Yeah, Turfel. And he provided the funding. So to honor him, they called it Lucifer. That's really that's the best I could find for where it came from. So you can literally say the Jesuits are up on a mountain in Mount Graham with a telescope named Lucifer looking for aliens. You could say that, and it's true, basically. It really is. It's a little oversimplified, but yeah. Gordon Cooper, U.S. astronaut. You want to know about UFOs and little green men? Contact the Vatican. They have an observatory out in Arizona, and that's what they're looking for. He said that. And I know I have to be getting finished up here. Malachi Martin, ex-Jesuit, he said on Art Bell that the mentality among those at the highest levels of the Vatican administration and geopolitics know what's going on in space, and what's approaching us could be of great import in the next 5 years. He died in 99, I think, so he was a little off on his timing, but according to him, they're expecting something. Okay, he didn't tell us what it was, but he does think that something's coming. And he was in a position to know. He was an advisor to 3 different popes, and he was released from his Jesuit vow of silence because of the corruption he saw in the church, and he wanted to leave and to expose it. Here's the director of the Borg, George Coignet. He said this in the press. I don't know if he was joking or what, but he said NASA's job will be to announce to the alien communication signals the Vatican will be searching for other planets and conditions for life. Should intelligent life be found, Father Coignet said the church would be obliged to address the question of whether they could be baptized into the Catholic Church. And, you know, that sounds, you're laughing, but look at it. Look at all the articles. The Pope's astronomer says if an alien wanted to baptize him, he would do it if you asked him. He's also said it doesn't matter how many tentacles you still have a soul. So I found, when I was writing the book Exo Vaticana, I found like 3 or 4 guys who had mentioned baptizing ETs. And they were all in this group we call VORG, which means Vatican Observatory Research Group. But since then, Pope Francis came out and said the same thing. And there's plenty of articles on the internet, and you can go verify these. And here's a recent one. Pope Francis if an alien wants to be baptized, he's ready to do it. Here is Father Balducci.
Padre Balducci, allora, lei che cosa risponderebbe a quanti sostengono che gli alieni sono già fra di noi?
Non si può più pensare è vero, non è vero, sono veri o sono falsità, ci si crede o non ci si crede, no. Oramai ci sono varie considerazioni che fanno dire con certezza che l'esistenza di questi esseri c'è, non si può dubitare.
There's no doubts. That's what he said. He's an exorcist theologian, member of the Vatican Curia. The Pope has to honor you with the title Monsignor, so the Pope made him a Monsignor. He was the official exorcist for the city of Rome, and he went out and spoke at UFO conferences saying that there are no doubts. They have to be aliens. He knows that they exist. He didn't tell me why, but he believes in them. And he said this to, you know, your typical New Age conference crowd, New Agers, you know, people that think they're in contact with aliens. This is who he was talking to when he said it. So not very encouraging. And here's him in a recent video saying that they're more intelligent than us, and they're on the way. So this is where the Vatican stands. I mean, they not only believe that they're possible, you have people like Balducci saying that there's no doubt and that they're smarter than us. And you know, I'm about out of time, but I hope from what we got through here that you can see that there's a lot of people that take this very seriously. And one of them is one of the largest religious institutions in the world, called the Roman Catholic Church. And the Pope has publicly said that he wants to baptize an extraterrestrial. Now, you have to ask yourself, why are they so interested in this? Are they just making it up or what? The book Exo Vaticana will give you a lot more detail about that. I don't have time to tell you all of it, but they really have reasons to think it's true. One of them is the miracle of Fatima. If you ever heard of that, they think that something flew across the sky. They blame it on Mary. It didn't have anything to do with Mary. It was a gray disc flying through the sky, and a bunch of kids channeled a message from Mary, just like New Age channelers do. And that's where the whole secrets of Fatima and all that, it's a UFO. It really is. There was something in the sky. They didn't know what it was. They blamed it on Mary, and a bunch of little kids channeled Mary, and that's where all these secrets came from. And they believe in this. And then in the 1950s, like 37 years later, another pope was about to proclaimed the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary, that Mary was taken up to heaven, did never die, just like Jesus did in the book of Acts. Okay, this is a doctrine that all Catholics are bound to believe because the Pope promulgated it. Why did he do it? The day before he was thinking about doing it, he saw a gray disc over the Vatican garden, just like Fatima. And he took that as a sign that he was supposed to promulgate that doctrine. Okay, so we have UFOs dictating theology to popes. For real. This is a handwritten note that he left. You can find it on the internet. So it's kind of spooky. And it's serious business. Now, I don't know if the aliens exist or any of this is going to happen, but the Catholic Church is definitely driven by this belief. And, you know, do with that what you wish. But there's a lot more details in the book, Ex Vaticana. I'll be at the book table signing those after this talk, and it'd be my pleasure to answer any of your questions. Thank you for having me. I'd just like to say a quick prayer. Lord God, I do ask that you would help us from being deceived. Lord, you warned us that even the elect might be deceived, that deception in these last days would become enormous. Lord, help us to be good stewards and to be clear thinkers and to see through these deceptions as they come our way. We ask in the name of Lord Jesus. Amen.
So how do you take this?
Tom Horn
yes.
and Cris Putnam wrote a book.
I'm very much aware of it, yes.
I love the book. I don't like the title. I kid Tom. He doesn't have a gift for titles. Exo Vaticana. I mean, what does that say? But the point is, it's one of the best documents I've ever seen on astrobiology. Mm-hmm. The work that he and Cris did in astrobiology is magnificent. I happen to know a lot about that area, mm-hmm. and it's the best treatment of the area I've ever seen. And I think it's a must book for any serious Christian to have. On the one hand, but they didn't just predict the abdication of the thing. They also uncovered this whole deliberate preparation to receive an alien visitor mm-hmm. of the Vatican, not secretly or as a little side thing. No, that's centerpiece. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fascinating.
And it's absolutely true. They have theologians who have written high-level theological documents about the arrival of an alien savior here to evangelize us and correct our theology. Maybe they have it right and we have it wrong, okay? Now, I don't believe that, of course, but I also don't want to be guilty of making an argument from silence, okay? An argument from silence would be, the Bible doesn't mention aliens, therefore aliens believe that a Jewish carpenter died for our sins, was buried for 3 days, and then rose from the dead and was seen by over 500 people. So you have to believe in the strange and unexplained to be a Christian. And that's really the point I was getting at. So it's really not that inconsistent. You know, God incarnated as a man and then allowed himself to be killed. That's a pretty weird belief in and of itself, but I happen to believe it's true. Now, I'm not going to tell you that everything that we're going to talk about in this lecture is true. In fact, I'm going to tell you why a lot of it's not true. And Chuck is going to talk later about what he calls hermeneutical precision and hermeneutical hygiene, like the way we read the Bible, what we believe is true, why we believe it's true. You know, there are extra biblical books that we refer to sometimes, but we don't treat them the same as Scripture. We look as the Bible as our source of truth, but we can use that to infer some other things that we'll talk about, but we don't say that those are definitely the truth. I try to draw a line between this is a fact, this is in the Bible, but if that's true, it might imply this. But I always want to make that distinction, and I want you to be clear when I'm speculating and when I'm not, so I'll make an effort to do that. It all kind of came together in this book, Ex Vaticana, and the interest in UFOs and the aliens and Christianity. How does this all imply? Why do we call it Ex Vaticana? It also had a long-running interest in UFOs and astronomy and space ever since I was a kid. My dad was an engineer and he was a scientist, and he kind of instilled that into me. I think he took me to see the movie Chariots of the Gods. Do you remember that one? With Eric Van Doniken, where everything is aliens. Like in 1973 when it first came out. I saw that when I was a little kid. And that, of course, made an impression on me. I didn't really know any better, but Eric Van Doniken is pretty much a heretic. He calls himself a Christian, but I don't think so. When I became seriously interested in Christianity, I didn't know how my interest in all this weird stuff was going to coincide with that, right? But I saw Chuck Missler on YouTube, I guess. It was Return of the Nephilim. And it was a two-part series, and it was really about UFOs and how it might connect to the Bible. And I said, wow, I didn't even know Christians were allowed to talk about that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, that's really what attracted me to Chuck at first. It's like, wow, you really can talk about it. And, and the Bible might actually have something to say about it. So that made a big impression on me. And, I saw that not all Christians are dismissive or, of the strange and unexplainable. And in fact, if you think about it, the admission to this club that we call Christianity, and a friend of mine, Guy Malone, I think I heard him say this first, but really, we believe, well, the Vatican is supposedly the leader of Christianity, and I think the first book we wrote, Petrus Romanus, did a fairly good job of explaining why I don't really believe that. I think they lost the gospel along the way. The Council of Trent, they actually cursed the gospel, if you ask me. At the Council of Trent, they say, if you say the man is saved by grace through faith alone, let him be an anathema, okay? Let him be accursed if you believe that you're saved by grace through faith alone. That's what the Catholic Council of Trent said. They've never taken that back, okay? In a sense, they cursed what I call the gospel. I think they're saved Catholics, but I think they have a lot of deception going on, and many of them aren't because they don't even know what the gospel is. But one thing that I was particularly proud of is Tom Horn's show, his new TV show, Skywatch TV. My friend Derek Gilbert is the host of that. He recently interviewed Chuck, and we should have sound here.
He's in the United States this week to talk to Congress and the United Nations. He's made a number of statements, and spokesmen for the Vatican have made statements very recently. Father Jose Funes, chief of the Vatican Observatory, the VORG, about the possible existence of extraterrestrial life and their spiritual state.
No. They are actually preparing to receive an alien
that's what I
visitor.
wanted to.
Hello, my name is Cris Putnam. It's my pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, Tom was not able to make it, but it's been an honor to work with Tom, and and I've learned a lot from Chuck Missler myself. I learned the whole Bible from Chuck, really. I started listening to the Calvary Chapel tapes from back when Chuck Smith was there. They had firefighters.org was an organization that had them on MP3s for free on the internet for years. And so I actually learned most of the Bible through Chuck by listening to those while I was cutting the grass or running or whatever I was doing. You can, with today's technology, you can use that to study when you're doing other things. And so that was really a blessing to me. I did end up getting a master's degree in theology from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary as a result of Chuck getting me fascinated with the Bible, and it's really had a lot to do with my Christian walk.